He has to keep reminding himself who he is. And with that, we'll get on with the meeting. We're live, I believe, and good afternoon and welcome to today's Licensing Committee meeting. I am Councillor Jeremy Cottam, the chairman of the committee. I'm supported today by members of the committee who are Councillor Paul Dick, Vice Chairman, Phil Barnett, Billy Drummond, David Marsh, Justin Pemberton, Jane Langford, Clive Taylor, and I don't think we have Martha here. Oh, you're substituting. I'm Stephanie, sorry. No, you never substitute. There we go. Hopefully that's a deliberate mistake at the beginning. All right, okay. Mr. Sean Murphy, Mr. Joe Mannix and Mrs. Moira Fraser are the officers who will be advising the meeting. Mr. Gordon Oliver is in attendance as the clerk to the committee, and the Zoom host is Mr. Thomas Radbourne. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please can I ask everyone present in the meeting area to make sure when speaking to be loud and clear so that those at home can hear you. Can I also ask you to make sure you have your mobiles put to silent and have turned the sound off on your computers if you can. If we hear an evacuation alarm this afternoon, we must leave the building immediately, proceed via the safe emergency exit route, which will be shown to us by trained officers. Please follow any instructions given by the trained officers. The assembly point is the Dolphin car park. Anyone requiring help will be assisted accordingly by trained officers. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted before we proceed? Thank you. We have received apologies from Councillors Nigel Foote and Councillor Paul Kander. So we will move to item 2. Basically, can I have a mover of the minutes for the committee held on the 8th of January, please?
So proposed.
And seconded. Thank you. Is everybody happy with the minutes? Right, thank you very much indeed. I think that was a show of hands. Okay. May I also move the minutes of the meeting of the Licence Committee held on the 9th of May be signed as a correct record, please? That's
so proposed, Chairman.
Thank you. And seconded. Thank you by Councillor Stevenson. Yeah. I'm just checking everybody was happy. Yeah, okay. And those 4, please. Thank you very much, and that's carried. As I wasn't here, I thought I should abstain. Right, okay. Have we got on item 3, have members, if they have any items that, any declarations of interest to declare? Thank you. Yes.
I do use taxis quite a lot, but I suspect that doesn't really count.
No. I had the same thought that occurred to me, that I'm not quite so often, but yeah, I think unless we're discussing a particular company, then that will be taken as read. Right, I'll sign these. Right, we move to item 4, West Berkshire Council Licensing Annual Report, which Moira Fraser to introduce, please.
Good afternoon, members. This annual report forms part of the annual cycle of reports that are presented to this committee. This year, we've put in place a revised format, and we would, of course, appreciate any feedback from members on that format, and if there's anything that you'd like us to see included or removed for next year. I will ask Mr. Murphy and Mr. Mannix to answer any technical questions that we may have arising from this report. The report provides feedback on the activities of the committee, as well as the licensing subcommittee, staffing activity relating to the various licensing regimes, that we administer, including the Licensing Act, the Gambling Act, taxi licensing, scrap metal licensing, street collections, dermal licensing, animal licensing, and street trading. Some of these areas will be more familiar to you than others. The report also sets out some information on joint working undertaken by the team and horizon scanning for those areas that we are aware of anything that is coming up. It is possible that with a change in government, some of these priorities may change and others may be expedited in due course. I am very pleased to report that by the end of July, the licensing team will, for the first time in a very long time, be fully staffed, that being the applications team as well as the enforcement team. And I'm especially pleased to note that one of our recently qualified level 4 apprentices has now taken up a full-time role in the licensing team, which shows that our grow your own policy set out in the PPP workforce is now starting to pay dividends. It is noticeable that we have had an upturn in the number of applications that are receiving objections and have now required members to meet more frequently as part of the licensing subcommittee. 7 hearings that took place last year was the highest number in the last 5 years. None of the decisions made in the last financial year were, however, appealed to the Magistrates' Court. In terms of the Licensing Act, a revised statement of licensing principles was adopted in December 2023. In terms of the licenses issued, we have seen an ongoing increase in the number of premises licenses that have been issued. Club premises licenses have stabilized at around 40, and we have now seen an increase in the number of temporary event notices, although we haven't seen the levels that were set back in 2020 when we received 610 applications in a year. The number of personal license issues are a cumulative number, so although they may seem really high, it is because those licenses are issued on a lifetime basis, and so they will keep increasing each year. The Gambling Act hearings are still few and far between, and we again did not have any hearings last year. The number of licenses issued in this area remains relatively steady, and the only significant change is a decrease in the number of small society lotteries. The team continues to work around the safety of women and girls in the nighttime economy, attend pub watch meetings, Institute of Licensing meetings, and also attend the Safety Advisory Group meetings. Much has been achieved over the past year, and with a full complement of staff in place and new legislation emerging, we are looking forward to an even busier 2024-25. In terms of taxi licensing, we are working towards bringing in the new policy to the November meeting prior to going out to consult on it again. In terms of the numbers of licenses issued, we have received a small increase in the number of applications for private hire vehicles and drivers and hackney carriage vehicles, albeit that there has been a significant decrease in the number of dual drivers since 2020. I don't propose to go through the data for all the other types of licenses, but we are happy to take any questions that members may have. In terms of horizon scanning, under the proposed new licensing of non-surgical cosmetic procedures in England legislation, practitioners will need to be licensed to perform specific non-surgical cosmetic procedures, and the premises from which they operate will also need to be inspected, which is likely to have a significant impact on the workload of the licensing team when it comes into effect. Members will now also be aware of Martin's Law following the Manchester Arena tragedy, and all business settings will have a duty to protect the public. The consultation of this bill concluded in March 2023, and it is anticipated that 2024, and it is anticipated that the protect duty will be implemented imminently. There is still some doubt as to who the regulator for that legislation will be. And as of the 1st of October, all bird keepers in England and Wales will be required to sign up to a register providing various details of how and where they keep their birds, irrespective of the number of birds they keep. So as you can see, there's a lot of interesting and varied work coming over the horizon for the team as well. Happy to take any questions, members.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Maura, for your report. As you said, it's very varied, the work that you do, and it's increasing the responsibilities. One of the new ones I see is monitoring single-use plastics, and I'm wondering how you're managing that. Whether that's a difficult one, whether you're being proactive in that, whether you advise people when they're having events about single-use plastic, which is another. So and also the reducing violence against women and girls. How do you work with the police and with pubs and with various licensed premises to actually tackle that? Is there anything specific you do? And with these any new responsibilities, are you struggling to meet these needs if your staff is remaining the same and you're actually having an increased workload? But specifically about how you're managing single-use plastics and the violence against women and girls. Thank you.
Chair, if I could just pick up the point about the single-use plastics. Yes, I mean that was a new duty that came in for the service, and as Moira's pointed out, we're expecting more new duties in due course, but they are fairly common in sort of landing on our plate, as it were. What the way that we've approached the single-use plastic issue was to do some awareness stuff with business in the first instance. We haven't got a kind of separate, as you would expect, we haven't got a sort of separate inspection regime, but effectively those officers that are visiting premises for other purposes, so that could be food hygiene, it could be for trading standards purposes, or occasionally it could be, or it could be for licensing purposes, so just picking that point up as part of their kind of general duties. I mean, what I can say, as far as I know, basically talking to the officers, the compliance, like a lot of these things, actually, when they're brought in, when there effectively is out and out prohibitions, the compliance is very high.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Chair. So for violence against women and girls, the licensing team meet regularly with TVP and other partners. It's something that we've implemented into our inspections. There are a number of schemes that are run to help promote the safety of women and girls in the nighttime economy, one of which is Ask Angela. So we generally encourage, we can't enforce, we can't require people, but generally we are seeing that people are operating and do have an awareness of Ask Angela, which for information members is a scheme whereby if a woman would find herself on a date, perhaps, or in an environment where she feels at threat, she would be able to go to a bar member, a staff member, and ask for Angela. And what the bar would then do is place her in a place of safety, remove her from the environment, potentially call her a taxi, or ensure that she's able to safely leave the premises.
Do you have any evidence to show that that's being used or how frequently it's used?
Anecdotal, mostly. It's not something that we've been recording. We are in the process at the moment of programming our risk rating inspections for licensed premises, for the Licensing Act, and it is one of the things that is on our pro forma for inspections. So I would hope that this time next year you'd be able to have a better sort of understanding of how many premises are doing it. You do generally find that premises that have a younger clientele do use it more often and are more aware of it. A lot of the bigger retailers, so Wetherspoons and such, do generally use it and do have signage or leaflets, especially in the toilets, to sort of make people aware.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chairman. Couple comments through the chair, if I may. Firstly, it's very encouraging to know that you've now been in a position to recruit and increase the numbers of staff in the department. And secondly, I think without it failing to go on record, I think this committee ought to commend the staff that were around during last year at a very difficult time. And several of the staff worked extremely hard, very challenging and difficult period, I might add, and at a time when there was a lot of activity that needed to be undertaken, especially areas of legal requirements of the licensing department. And they put themselves out and went the extra mile to carry out those things. So I would hope that that would go down on record, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Drummond.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question for you, Chair. Moira, really good news that we've got one successful apprentice going through Grow Your Own. Is there any more in the pipeline coming through?
So in the first cohort, Councillor Drummond, we've had 4 apprentices. 3 of them have now successfully completed their apprenticeship course. And they've moved across into different teams within the PPP. So one of them is working in the housing team at the moment. And one of them is working in the community team and with the partnership support team. And our final, number 4, had his final exam this morning. I'm still waiting to hear how that went. But I have no doubt that it will have gone well. So we will have 4 qualified apprentices from the first cohort of people that we had. And then we've got 2 people who are doing their level 6 apprenticeship in trading standards. That's a 2 or 3 year course, depending on your initial qualifications. And we've also got somebody who's starting her 2nd year of her environmental health level 6 qualification. And that's the 2nd of 4 years. And now that we've got people that have successfully gone through the system, we'll be looking to take in a new cohort of people, perhaps not at the level of 4, but yes, certainly to start taking a new cohort of people through.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, can I endorse wholeheartedly the remarks from the past chairman about the work the staff did in the course of last year. We were all really impressed, really impressed. Secondly, feedback to those who contributed to the report. Personally, I think the format's excellent. It's much clearer, much more helpful, and the information is easily accessible therein. And finally, there's lots of stats. Now, we could discuss the stats for hours and maybe understand them all in the end, but I would simply ask a question of the report writer. Is there anything in the stats, trends, I guess, that cause concern for the officers going forward, or indeed trends that members need to note? Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Murphy.
Chair, if I may, through yourself answer that question. I mean, it's interesting, Councillor Dick, actually looking at the stats that we have for West Berkshire. In fact, our numbers are holding up very well, and in fact, in some areas you can see we've increased the number of licences. I do know that, as you know, that we cover at least one other authority for licensing purposes, and they have seen a significant increase, for example, in the number of taxi licenses, private hire licenses. And, you know, so in those respects, you know, I think the position here in West Berkshire is quite a positive one, not just for the trade, but obviously for the public as well, and the access to those services, those valuable services that these various licence holders of various types of the district actually provide. So my kind of overall take on the stats is actually it's a very positive picture locally.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm content.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Taylor and Councillor Marsh and Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I also thought it was a good report, easy to understand, easy to read. So thanks very much to the officers that put this together. My only comment, and this, you know, reading it through, there were a couple of areas where I felt I would have liked to have seen a little more information. And this, on pages 26 and 28, there's a reference made to reports that were issued. And then there's a subset of numbers, I think, that are called complaints. And I felt it would have been useful to see a little more information as to what those, particularly the complaints, were about. How many were dismissed? How many were, you know, were action taken? Did action result from those complaints? Is that information contained anywhere else? It's really the question I would ask, and perhaps it's something that could be included in future years.
Mrs. Fraser, or?
Certainly something to put in for next year. We don't have that information to hand here, and it's not publicly available elsewhere, but certainly we can put it in for next year.
Okay, I think Councillor Taylor was just asking for that in future meetings, yes? Thank you. Councillor March?
Thank you, Chair. One comment and one query. First of all, on helping the taxi trade go greener on page 12. I mean, this has been a long time coming. I've been banging on about it for 5.5 years, and it was slow to take off, but it's just great to see that we are now getting vehicles, hybrids and full electric vehicles coming on board and taking advantage of that encouragement that the council is giving them. So that is fantastic. So well done to Moira and the team. And then my query, and I'm just looking at on page 13 at the other licenses. It's keep or train animals for exhibition. And I noticed that we've got 4 of these, which seem to be 4 new ones. And all we can be sure of is that with Councillor Pemberton here, that they're not goldfish. But I'm trying to work out what these animals might be and who's exhibiting them. So could anyone enlighten me on that?
Yeah, I mean, locally, so there used to be some very old legislation called the Performing Animals Act. I think that went back to the 1920s, and more recently it was updated with the new animal welfare establishment regulations. So off the top of my head, I would imagine that these are things like sort of petting farms, that type of thing. So we're not talking about maybe falconry is another common area that these things these licenses are in place for. But actually the regime around it is quite tight. It's very tight now. I mean, the old legislation was that you simply had to register with the local authority. Now there is a whole inspection regime and everything else to look after the welfare of the animals. But over the years, there can be we've had various registrations or licenses with the authority, and so things like even animals that, for example, appeared in TV programs and things like that, basically have come into the system over the years. And so that's, I mean, I can get you the details. I'm quite happy to. It is a public register, I believe, so I'm quite happy to share the details as to what those 4 licenses are with the committee.
Trouble, that would be. I mean, that's already really interesting. Thank you. I must say, I'd love to have a job in your department, but not doing taxis and pubs, but doing animals and things like that. Sounds fascinating. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stevenson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was very interested, Moira, when you read your report to talk about that new legislation that's coming on board for procedures to people's appearance, I take it is. But I noticed that we've already got a huge number of licenses issued for dermal, personal and premises registration. And that's gone up 150 in the last 4 years. So it's obviously the in thing. I can't think what on earth our inspection will be carrying out. Is it checking that they've got qualifications to carry out those procedures? I mean, I take it it's also hygiene and that sort of thing, but I cannot imagine that we're qualified to decide if they're able to do Botox or not.
Mr. Mannix.
Through you, Chair, if I may. So what we have is we've adopted the standard regulations. What that means is when we do an inspection, what we are checking is that they have sufficient hand washing facilities, that the surfaces are of the correct type, so there's nothing porous that could hold bacteria in. It's about providing the safest environment for someone to have their skin pierced, and ultimately with the aim of promoting public safety, preventing sort of the spread of disease or anything like that. We have a fixed schedule that we look at. So every premises that we look at is examined against the same criteria. So they must hit the same standards. So one, it's a uniform standard that goes across most of the country, but also it is primarily to ensure that there's no, really obvious facilities. They also have to have facilities for sanitation. So for needles, there can't be multi-use needles. Obviously, you don't want them using on the same person, but also that they've got facilities to clean the equipment properly. So yeah, it's sort of a fixed standard that's applied.
Thank you. Councillor Pemberton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Vickers raised the issue of single-use plastics, which I think we can all agree extremely important. I think the regulations that came into force late last year were a long time in coming. It's something that should have happened much, much sooner. Through some of the work that I do with the plastic-free communities in Thatcham, I personally have heard anecdotal reports that some retailers, some food servers, are not aware of the regulations, or they're certainly not aware of what their obligations under the regulations are. I know in reality it's not as straightforward as that, and I do accept that a huge amount of work will have been put in by the team in terms of working with the food sector and educating them, etc. But I'd just be interested to hear what the officers' take on this is in terms of knowledge and compliance levels. Is there genuinely a lack of knowledge within the sector? Do some retailers not know what the regulations are? Do they not know they exist? Or is it perhaps that the regulations themselves are quite complex and a lot more work needs to be done in that field? Thanks.
Thank you. Who would like to take that one? Mrs. Fraser?
So there's always more work that you can do, Councillor Pemberton, when it comes to education, because I think that, and reinforcing messaging as well. We did write, when the legislation came in, we did write to all of the bodies to let them know what the requirements were. And in terms of compliance, we're not aware of a great deal of deviation, but if anybody is aware of any premises where this is not happening, then of course we'd welcome that intelligence, so that when people are going around to inspect those premises, they would, that's something that they can look out for. But the officers are, as part of the normal, as Sean explained, as part of their normal visits, where they go and do the food hygiene inspections and food compliance inspections, that they are looking for that kind of thing. I think you do tend to probably find it more at things like fairs and sort of outside kind of catering places. That's, but the businesses themselves have all been notified of the legislation.
Thank you. Yes, I think councillor intelligence is very important, and I raise it with the officers if there are, you're identifying problem areas. I'd like to finally, commend the full and comprehensive report that we've had, and I do like the style. And the comments by councillors about the Botox injections and the plastic recycling or single use, and even bird flu. I mean, related to the knowing where birds are and how many they are. I think it shows you the huge responsibilities our officers are taking, and this committee is looking after. So I think they're doing a great job. Thank you very much indeed. And with that, I will need a proposer and a seconder to basically set out the recommendations on page 11. The committee is asked to approve the annual report as set out in the appendix.
So proposed, Chairman.
Thank you. Seconded. Thank you. And those show, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So declare the recommendation has been carried. We now move to item 5 and ask Mrs. Fraser to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The Council has a legal duty to publish an updated statement of gambling principles at least every 3 years under the Gambling Act 2005. Our current iteration was published in January 2022 and must therefore be adopted and republished by January 2025. The document was subjected to a significant overhaul in 2022. We've proposed one very, very minor change this year, which is to update the population data while we await the outcome of the Gambling Act Review white paper, which was launched in 2023. We've also need to point out that we've had no challenges to the current iteration of the document. We have sought advice from our legal colleagues, and unfortunately we have no option but to consult again on this document, despite the change being a very minor one. We're also unable to delay the adoption while we await the outcome of the government consultation. Under the Gambling Act, we have to consult the Chief Officer of Police, people carrying on gambling businesses in the authority's area, those likely to be affected by it, and you will see a list of people that we are proposing to consult in paragraph 5.9, as well as the appendix to the report. And as been reminded by the Vice Chairman, that we would also like to include a list of schools and under those people that we're consulting on this legislation. We're intending to consult for an extended 8-week period between the 18th of July and the 12th of September. And we're going for a slightly longer period of time because some of that period will fall over the summer break. We will bring the outcome of the consultation back to the November Licensing Committee meeting. And members will then be asked to recommend that the document be adopted by full council with or without modifications arising from the consultation. Happy again to take any questions, members.
Thank you. I've asked officers also to maybe make some items clearer. For example, it refers to the machines that are used, what I would refer to as one-armed bandits, and that to give just a brief overview of what those designations are. The A-type, which are the highest prizes, the E-type, which is the lowest prizes. I think it just helps clarification of the paper. And Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Maura, you mentioned consulting with schools, although it's not on your list, but you've obviously think that's important. I assume that would also include our youth centres, such as the Waterside. The comment that comes back when there is any, I'm referring to the Waterside because I don't know exactly what happens in schools, is that when you consult with young people, you need to actually do it in a slightly different way as regards the wording, as you do with adults. So I hope that this will be taken into account and you could get advice from the youth leaders at the Waterside about the appropriate way of consulting with young people, because it shouldn't just be a sort of tick box, we've done it. It should be effective. And we did get that feedback, and I can't remember what the consultation was, but there was something that happened not that long ago. And one of the youth leaders said that really the language and the way it was done was not very appropriate. I think it was possibly health related. So I hope we could have some effective consultation with young people. That would be good.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments? No, thank you.
No, except to say I understand the point there, but I'm sure officers know how to consult and how to interpret the answers, and I'm sure it'll be done well. And it's good to see education now. Sorry, let me just finish it. Sorry. And just to see, it's good to see schools now involved in the consultation, because they're not always. Thank you.
Thank you. Fine. Well, with that, we'll basically looking for a proposal and second, and what I'm suggesting from the chair is we take these en bloc as approval 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3, and ask for, unless there are any objections, ask for a proposal and seconder, please. And seconded. Thank you very much indeed. Ask members to show their recommendation. Raise their hands. Thank you. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So I declare the recommendation has been carried. Thank you very much indeed. So we move to item 6. Mrs. Fraser, to introduce the report, please.
Members will recall that we brought a paper to the January meeting setting out proposals from the trade to increase the taxi tariffs by around 3.02% and also to amend the filing charges. As the setting of tariffs is an executive function, we had to take the report to the March executive meetings to seek permission to go out to consult on the proposed revised tariffs. The executive agreed to undertake the consultation, which ran from the 21st of March to the 11th of April. We received around 35 we received 35 individual responses to the statutory consultation, and also received a letter signed by 77 of the cab co-drivers. Some of the responses that received were supportive of the proposals, some objected, and some general comments were also found. Of those responses, 14 responses were from taxi drivers, 3 from operators, 8 from residents, 9 from members of the community panel, and 1 from an officer within the home to school transport team. 68% of the respondents objected to the increase. There was, however, some support for the filing charges. This information was fed back to the executive, and at the 23rd of May meeting, they decided not to increase the tariffs in 2024, but they did agree to adjust the filing charges. This decision was not universally welcomed, and the trade has been informed that they are able to submit another proposal should they wish to do so. In any event, we are likely to receive a new proposal for the 2025 tariffs ahead of the November meeting, as part of the annual cycle of the way these things work. The report is to note only, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any points to be raised? No, thank you very much indeed. This is a report to note only, and I propose that we note 2.1 and 2.2 as put out on page 85, and ask for a proposal, please. Thank you. Seconded. Thank you very much indeed. And those for, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Right, we go to item 7, forward plan, and I assume here. Okay, Mrs. Fraser, are you going to take that one again? You've been working very hard to that this evening.
So members, this is the forward plan. Happy to take any additions. We haven't come across anything this evening that we've needed to add. We hope to bring the Hackney carriage and private hire licensing policy to the next meeting, as well as the feedback from the statement of gambling policies. The other thing that we were asked to discuss is we were bringing back some proposals around site visits for licensing hearings, but not only site visits, potentially other ways of presenting information about locality to members, and ask you to make a determination on that. And then there's the usual fees and charges report that will come to the November meeting as well. Happy to take any additions or any comments or questions from members.
Thank you. Just one comment, if I may, by the chair, is that when we look at the virtual presentations, that, for example, similar to the actual the planning committees, so they can have photographs and drawings set out, so we can look at that as another option to consider, as well as maybe visits. Thank you. Councillor Stevenson, I believe.
Yes, Mr. Chair. It wasn't just to introduce site visits, I seem to recall. It was we were asking for really good maps, because I remember a particular one. I don't live in Newbury, so I wasn't completely aware of its location or what it looked like round and about and at the reverse of the premises, the rear. So a map would have been helpful.
Yes.
If we can't, fit in site visits.
You're with me on this completely. That was one of my proposals, that a map and plan of the building and photographs. Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may, through you, we've talked about the load that the licensing team carries, which is considerable. We've talked about, you could hear clearly that some of our councillors would like them to be keep their eye very carefully on enforcement and indeed education. And that obviously is unlimited, if you like, but to support an important thing. So I just wonder, we had a conversation about site visits, and my personal opinion is that that's not necessary, but because again, it's more time, and there are lots of awkward things if you think about it, as opposed to a planning visit, but with some decent photographs or schematic drawings, which officers can do when they're visiting to gather the information anyway. I think that would be sufficient for our purposes. And if we all agree that we can lighten the load for the officer writing the report about how we take that item forward. But if you're not with me, then I'll shut up. Thank you.
I think we're just looking at the moment as this is one of the consideration items to be considered. So we'll have a choice of A, B or C of how we might do it. And it will be up to the committee to decide which route we go down.
Chairman, also just to say that in terms of the maps and presentation of information, that's kind of an operational decision, and we would endeavour to improve that before the November meeting, not wait until that time for that decision to be made.
I'm glad to hear that. Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, I sat on a number of subcommittee meetings this year, and I can think of at least a couple where I thought a site visit would have been useful, but probably not all of them. So I'm wondering if we could perhaps be somewhat selective in this, and perhaps when a subcommittee, for example, is selected, the members of that committee could determine quickly whether they feel a site visit would be useful.
If it's of major concern and we believe it would help, I think that might be going through the chair and making a decision again with the actual committee itself. Thank you for that. I think that we come to an end here. All the business has now been concluded. Thank you for your attendance, everybody. The date of the next meeting is the 4th of November, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. And with that, I close the meeting, but please remain seated until we've turned off the Zoom. Thank you.